Hey, hello! This is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Okay, engagers, here we are today and we have Toby Beresford. Toby, are you prepared to engage?
I'm willing and ready.
Let's do this. So,
Great.
Toby is a software entrepreneur. He's the founder of rise.global, a universal scorecard platform and longstanding gamification enthusiast. He's also working on a new book, the Score Science Notebook, which provides practitioner models for infinite gamification design. You can also follow him on Twitter at Toby Beresford, and on LinkedIn, looking at his name, but it'll also be on the show notes page, so you can connect and get more of Toby. So, Toby, is there anything that we've missed that you think is relevant from your interview, or any personal details you'd like to give away?
Following the Facebook questions, I don't think I want to give any personal details away. But I suppose. I suppose the only thing to say is I'm based in a place called Hazelmere, which is in the UK. It's a kind of a rural part of the UK, so it's it's about an hour's train ride south of London. So and that's where I'm speaking to you from today. I'm just sitting in my garden office, looking out over the field, and as the sun is quietly starting to set. So it's a very nice, calm evening, and I'm looking forward to having a nice conversation.
That sounds very, very, very nice. The city has its attractive, but definitely living outside on the outskirts, on the outsides, and having all that peace is something that is very, very nice as well.
It's lovely. Cool.
So, Toby, talking about your days and about the peace that you get on your house, what does a regular day with Toby look like?
Well, a regular day for me, I've got kids, so my regular day starts at like 6 a.m. and they one of them is up pretty bright and breezy, and we get them ready for have breakfast and get ready for school. Take kids to school, and then I jump on a train. And right now I'm working as a contractor on some AI ad tech. So it's a sort of a cutting edge sort of advertising technology company in Guildford, and so I work there during the day, and I'm basically sat in front of a computer. And then lunchtime, I've just got into this thing called Founders Nation. I don't know whether you've come across it before, but it's
haven't heard it.
It's a platform for founders to meet each other. So anybody who wants to start a new business goes onto Founders Nation and says, "Hey, I'm a marketing guy. I'm looking for someone who can do the coding," or "I'm a coder. I'm looking for someone who can find the funds and fundraising." And essentially, it's just a place for people with really great ideas to meet each other and just start an interaction. And I'm finding it really a fascinating place to be. And every day, it seems, I get a new person who comes on and says, "Toby, I've got a great idea. Would you like to collaborate with me?" And these are people from all around the world. And some of them I say, "Yeah, sounds a great idea," and some of them I say, "Is not my bag," and we kind of have a chat. So usually in lunchtimes, I'm having a chat with another potential co-founder, just looking for the next startup. Then afternoon is more working in the office with coding, programming, designing, all of those sorts of things. And then in the evenings I'll come home. We'll have some supper. I'll clean up, just lots of washing up and things like that. In between, I might do some rise.global issues, so kind of covering any of the questions there, and perhaps even a little bit more coding for that. And then and then that's pretty much. Then I might go swimming if it's a good day, and I'm hoping maybe tonight I'll get a chance to go swimming. And I'm quite into this. My local pool has something called Swim Tag, which is where you get a bracelet with your membership, and it tracks every single stroke, every single swim, and it's been a really kind of really great for me because it's all opt-in, so I'm choosing to opt in, and I started doing it, and I was probably doing, I don't know, my initial swims were not particularly strong, maybe, I don't know, 1,500 meters or something like that. But as I started, what I found is that as I was starting to use the swim tag and getting the feedback, and it gives you these wonderful bar charts and shows you exactly how fast you swum, how far, how many lengths doing crawl, how many lengths doing breaststroke, and so on. I suddenly found it myself trying to increase the number of lengths. So it was a kind of real. Almost by accident, I gamified myself and just sort of suddenly found that I was getting more and more interested in just doing the swimming. I loved the feedback, and so now I regularly do about 2,500 meters. So it's been really interesting to see how the gamification element in that swim tag, even without me kind of intending it to do anything, without any kind of other mechanics really, other than just that simple mechanic of giving me feedback of how far I've swum, I've found that I've actually ended up swimming a bit more each time. So anyway, so that's what I'm looking forward to tonight, is a bit of swimming.
You were telling that story, and I remembered, I'm not sure if she said it on this podcast or I heard her talking on a podcast, Monica Cornetti, when she was talking about that she loves treadmills instead of going outside for a run, because she can see the feedback right there and know how much she's doing, how much more, how much less, how much is left.
Yeah, that's true, except that, well, the only thing I'd say to Monica is that obviously a real run, you do get some pretty good feedback because you can see how far you've gone. There's that. Have you seen that film Rocky IV? There's the classic where Rocky is the American boxer, so it's an American film, but he's an American boxer, and his training regime involves kind of lifting up carts and sort of doing pull-ups on old wooden beams. And
in the middle of the snow, in
the middle of the snow, you got it, yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, "Yeah, come on, Rocky!" And then he's running up the hill and running up the mountain. And when he gets to the top of the mountain, he gets to kind of go, "Rocky, Rocky!" And at the same time, you're seeing it kind of pans to the Russian, the Ivan Drago, doing on a treadmill with a kind of with scientists. And when he gets to the top of his kind of virtual mountain, he just sort of slumps and feels finished. So I think I would probably say to Monica, there are actually real advantages. It's probably going to kill me, but anyway, Monica, if you're listening, feel free to have a chat on your podcast, and we can talk about the positive pros and cons. But I really do think I would prefer to go on a run up a mountain rather than a treadmill, because I think the view from the top can be astounding.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't have the advanced one for swimming, but I do have a band for running, which I particularly went for that one because it allows me to leave my mobile back home and still measure how much kilometers I'm making. So
yeah, no, the bands are good, aren't they? Yeah, and I suppose if I had a choice, I would go and swim I've swum in a lake before, and that was lovely. Where you swim. I swum across Lake Buttermere in the Lake District. And it really is a real sense of achievement, because it's about the same distance, about 1,500, about 2.5 k's across lengthwise. So it's quite a long swim. But actually, if you're swimming across a lake, you get to the other end. And me and my friend, when we got there, we were just like jumping up and down. We loved it. So there's something to be said for the real world with all these things.
Definitely. So, Toby, we're going to go right into the next question. And that question is what we like to call is your favorite fail, or the first attempt in learning, as Ann Coppens called it in Gamification Europe last year. What has been your favorite fail, or something around failure that has even led you to future success, where you have learned a lot? I mean, we like to get into the story of how that happened, how you went into it, and what are the things that you learned from such an experience?
It's a good question. So I guess one of my biggest learnings is when I introduced rise.global, I kind of introduced it really as a leaderboard platform. So it was really focused on the idea of who's going to win. And what we found with that mechanic is it is just as you know, it's just one of the gamification mechanics, is that it does motivate a large section of people. And we work with this one client, and they're a professional services firm, so they've got about 120, and they're global. They've got 120,000 people across the globe, all working. And the marketing team wanted to get everybody enthused about the new brand that they were launching. So they said, right, okay, why don't we have a big quiz, and everybody has to answer questions about the brand, and we'll also give them some points if they talk about the quiz and talk about the brand on Yammer, the social network. And we'll also give them points if they tell their friends, so if they email their colleagues about the campaign. And in this way, they were hoping to kind of get the word out about the brand, because they can't just, in a big company, you can't just email everybody and say, hey, we've got a new brand, because no one's going to read the email, and everyone says, oh, stop spamming me. So they had to sort of run the campaign just as you would a normal marketing campaign to your customers or whoever it is, but this was internal. And they said, well, right, we're going to run it. We've got all these mechanics, we've got all these different ways to score points. And we've got the quiz, we've got sharing on social media, we've got telling your friends directly, referrals. And what we're going to do is we're going to show the leaderboard every day. We'll refresh it, and whoever gets the top 3 people in the world, we're going to give them an iPad. And this was 5 or 6 years ago, and an iPad it was pretty much as if you might feel it is worth today. It's a sort of it's a nice prize, but if you're working in a big company, it's not. You might already have one. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So they thought, as the managers of this program, that this global program, that the iPad was a kind of a reasonable prize, but wouldn't incentivize or distort the whole environment too much. And my goodness me, they were totally wrong. I mean, it was this amazing kind of explosion across the organization where instead of the usual, they had 300 or 400 people engaged, they suddenly got 10,000 people, and we were watching them come in on the servers like one a second, bang, 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 somebody new registering, doing the quiz, sending it out on Yammer. And what of course we forgot is that a large proportion of their staff were working in call centers in India. They were kind of relatively lowly paid people, even in India. So for them, an iPad isn't just a sort of a small prize; it's a very big prize. So for them, this was their opportunity to win essentially 3 months' salary just by competing and doing a quiz and putting stuff on social media. So of course the whole social media network got completely spammed, and everyone complained. Their email, some people came in and wrote these email clients to spam all of their colleagues' emails. So people were sending out like 1,400 emails on a Sunday morning just to talk about this brand quiz. So it just was completely the behavior was completely sort of the opposite of I mean, in one sense, the marketing team were quietly quite pleased. I mean, they did want that sort of level of, they did want everybody to hear about the campaign, but they didn't really want quite such a, they didn't want people to behave badly as a result. And I think so. That really kind of led me to first of all see the power of gamification. I mean, it was very engaging. People were very interested in it, and the transparency and the feedback transparency was a huge sort of plus. People, they loved seeing the fact that they could do something and they see their score and they could see how they were on their way to win. And there was the sort of the kind of questions and how's my score, why is my score this, the kind of the interrogation of the score was exceptional and really interesting. But on the negative side, there's this whole kind of thing where people were doing things that they wouldn't normally do just to win the prize was a real kind of no and actually led the team to say, okay, after I think they actually shut it down after 10 days. They said we're going to run it for 2 weeks, but actually let's shut it down now. And they awarded the prizes and said, right, be done with it. So it was a very interesting kind of example really of where, firstly, giving prizes is so difficult to do well. Giving a real physical reward, so dangerous when it comes to gamification, because you can completely sort of incentivize the wrong behavior.
So Toby, precisely on that same direction, because as you know, hindsight is 20/20, definitely. What are things that you would perhaps do different? Things that you learned from that experience that are now, when you are going to create a new leaderboard of that sort for a company, you would do in a different sense, or you would advise them to do differently?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. So I think the key thing we would do differently now is tell the client not to start with a big prize. Don't give a prize for being top of the leaderboard, because at the end of the day, only 1% of your players, of your people, are going to win, going to be the number one. So actually, although number one is very interesting, and that's part of what drives the mechanic, people love to see who's number one. You need to think what's in it for everybody. And so now what I recommend is that the focus of any of these sort of campaigns is first and foremost on people's score. What score have you got? And how well are you doing personally against yourself or against against the kind of the rubric that you set. But and then the leaderboard is a secondary thing. It's something interesting on the side, but actually the primary thing is what's your score. So the people are still getting their feedback, but it's not so much about the ranking. It becomes less important. So that's probably the key piece of advice that we now give clients.
That's fantastic, because as you said, there might be somebody, I think you mentioned it when you were talking about the iPads and physical rewards in general, that the over-justification effect can kick in. That's when the reward becomes more important than the actual activity for a person that even perhaps was interested in doing the activity. And depending on how they value those rewards, it could be a risk of actually not getting the feedback that you want, not getting the results that you want from your people, from whomever you are trying to motivate. So that's a fantastic example, Toby. I really, really like it. I really enjoyed it. And it's from a typical thing that people say to stay away from leaderboards. But I don't totally agree. I think they're very useful for many things. And that's a key learning from using a fantastic leaderboard. And in a way, it's also a story of success. And that's what we want to shift right now to. A story of actual success when you were using some sort of gamification strategies for whomever, for a client, for learning, that you think was actually a success. Maybe not even the first time, but the second time or whenever it was. And for you to tell us that story so we can go deep and get those learnings from you.
So we had a really good project last year with a power company. So their job is to keep the lights on. So if you imagine that they've got about 3,500 staff across the sort of the southeast of the UK, and their job really is whenever there's a problem with a fuse box, with a kind of a substation, or a tree falls on the line, they send out their engineers to go and fix it, and that's so their job really is to try and keep the lights on. Now I was talking to them about using gamification to try and help their staff, the guys actually on the ground in the well, if you like, fixing these very high voltage, very dangerous situations, fixing these very, very high voltage lines. Can we give them some feedback so that they can see whether they're doing well on their job? And it was a success in the sense because this company had just spent millions of pounds on transforming their business, all their business systems from paper to digital. So they'd gone 100% digital, and they spent a good number of years doing it. And what was very interesting for us is that all the reporting that was coming out of that digital system was going back to the managers. So the managers suddenly had these very rich, very useful reports: who was doing what, where, how many people were getting to site on time, how long it was taking, how long each fault was taking to fix, which were the most complicated faults, and so on. So they were getting really good, rich data, really good management data coming out of this digital system. But the funny thing is that the staff themselves, they were not getting a single report. So this whole system had been designed without them in mind. They were simply the kind of they were simply the people who were putting the data in. They were the data inputters. So they'd be fixing the fault. They'd say, they click a button, I've arrived on site. They click another button, say the fault is fixed. They click another button saying the customer's happy, or whatever it is. So you have this real kind of sort of information asymmetry really between the management and the staff, and that was causing some interesting side effects and problems for the business. One of them was that the staff didn't know what were the important metrics. They just didn't know. They didn't know whether it was important for them to get to the site on time. They didn't know whether it was important to them whether it was important to fix the fault well or to fix it quickly. They didn't know whether they didn't know what was important. So we created this program, and it was a scoring program. So and we used the existing data. There wasn't any new data that the guys had to enter, but we pulled the existing data out of SAP, and we pushed it all into a single score algorithm because we wanted to keep it simple, because nobody wants to look at hundreds of charts. It's far too complicated. So we did some work, and we said, okay, we'll give 30% of the score to how long it takes them to get there, another 40% for how well they fixed the fault, and if they've done it on time, if no one else has to fix it, and so on, and we're given another 30% to how many faults they managed to fix in the week. And so it was a kind of a smorgasbord of different metrics. It wasn't a perfect perfect reflection of their job. It wasn't meant to be something where if they got to the top they get promoted, or if they got to the bottom they get fired. It wasn't meant to do that. It was simply about saying, let's give you some more feedback on how you're doing at your job. And it was the most brilliant project, because we really suddenly saw how gamification can bring to life quite sort of possibly quite droll data, but in a format that was accessible to somebody whose day job is fixing high voltage lines. And one of the most interesting things that came out of the whole program, we had lots of really fascinating learning. So some people liked it, some of them didn't. Some of them said, this is great, I'm using this to improve. Some of them found a whole set of problems with their IT equipment that no one knew about, because actually what's interesting is when you're being scored, you're interested in whether your IT equipment works. So actually that one of the first things they realized is that quite a few of the guys, their tough pads weren't working properly, and now, whereas before they might have just gone, oh, the computer doesn't work, now they actually say, oh, hang on, my computer's not working because my score's wrong. So these guys really found they found just that baseline really useful. But the second thing they suddenly found was that during the period of the program, that during May last year, for the first time in the entire history of that team, of that division, of that company, they all got to site they all managed to get from hearing that somebody had lost their power. They managed to get to the site within 40 minutes, which was unheard of. So something went right. The guys suddenly saw the scores that were important to management, which were important to the customer, most importantly, and then they modified, they tweaked, I think is the best way of putting it. They tweaked their behavior just in order to kind of deliver a better service to the customer. So we thought it was just the most fantastic project, because it just showed that gamification, and the thing that was interesting about it, gamification was the only thing we did. We didn't do anything else. There was no prizes, no incentives, no rewards, no £20 notes for £20 prizes for whoever did best in a week. It was simply the power of the system, of the score, which led to this change in behaviour. So it's really exciting. And I spoke to him. Yeah, funny enough, just in order to just to check in before this podcast, I spoke to him, the client, today, and said, look, we're a year on now. How was this in May? And he said, yes, it's remarkable that the team has stuck to it, and they've managed to maintain that as their metric. It's somehow the fact that the gamification process has trained them, and I think this is where kind of the education, they've now know what's important to me and the management and the customers, and so they're doing it themselves. So it's just super exciting.
Wow, that sounds super exciting and very, very interesting to participate in. And it brings me back to something that I've commented a few times, and it has to do with the grades and the educational system. And I think one of the key things in that project is that you were certainly measuring the right things. So the big question in education, and this happens to us pretty frequently in this podcast, is, are we measuring what we want to measure? Are the grades reflecting what we want to measure from the learning of the students? In the case of Toby's project, they were measuring exactly what they were looking for. They were looking for making sure that people arrived to the site on time, that they did their work right, and 2 or 3 more things. So they were being assigned these points, and they were modifying or tweaking their behavior towards what they were asking for, what the management needed, what the objectives were. And this brings me directly into that reflection of what is it that we want to make sure the students do? What is it that we want to make sure that the students or the clients change? And that's where you need to focus. And you may need to make sure that you're measuring those right things to get you to that result. So that's absolutely fantastic, Toby. Thank you for that story.
And actually, it reminds me of another thought, which is in my book, in the Score Science Notebook, is that one of the things that I talk about is this idea of score opacity versus transparency, and it just might be relevant, really, just for that conversation, because one of the problems that any project has is that you can't measure everything. So and in that one there was, we didn't have it was very difficult to measure safety, other than he's still alive and he hasn't electrocuted himself. How do you measure whether the job was done safely? And actually you can't measure it technically. So it was an interesting conversation that we had with the client, is that actually some of the most important things, that the fact that the guy is doing the job safely and is doing it to a very high quality standard, we weren't measuring. So actually we did have this conversation about, are we measuring the right things? And so what comes back to is making sure, what we had to really do a lot of work on is making sure that the score, the things that were transparent enough, and so that because this was a fully transparent score, so we had to do a lot of work to say, look, we know that this score is measuring this aspect of your work
and not this other one.
And we had to be very clear about that, because when you receive a score, if you imagine you don't get any communication, and someone says, hey, Rob, your score is 12 out of 100. You're like, what? Okay, but it's you just think, my goodness, this score reflects the whole of my work. But no, so we had to be really clear to them that the score is not designed to reflect your whole, the whole of your work. It's designed to reflect, to be honest, how well you're using the computer to enter the data. And once the players matured, and I think there is a maturity here, continuum. They need to get more mature. When people first receive a score, they're not that mature. But actually, as they get to grips with it, they become more mature. As the players matured, it became then more useful and was put into the right context. And I think that was a really important point about your thing about we need to measure the right things, and even we also need to be clear so that the players know what we're measuring and what we're not measuring, so that everybody knows it's not, if it's the whole thing, great, or if it's a part of the thing, also great, but everyone needs to know which it is.
That's fantastic, Toby. That's fantastic. So now we're going to move on into the next section of this interview, and it's where we talk about perhaps what we call the quick answers, the rapid fire questions. So the first question, Toby, is if there's something that you could say, and I think I have an idea of what your answer will be about, and is if there's anything that you would say is a best practice or something any gamification project could benefit from.
So, for me, I think the key is to spend more time on the score. So the score itself, I think what does the score mean and what goes into it, and getting the score itself right, the scoring rules, I think would really benefit any gamification project. I think that we tend to sort of, quite a lot of gamification projects tend to sort of look a bit too sort of broad and look at sort of levels and epic wins and all the rest of it. But actually, if the score itself is meaningless and nonsensical, then people will quickly get annoyed with it. So I think that the one thing I would say is, spend lots of time getting the score right and the algorithm right that goes into the score, and that will, once that's robust, you can build from there.
And this is not a random answer, engagers. Toby is an expert in scoring science and is an expert in leaderboards and all these things. So he takes it very seriously and he walks the talk. So he's very into these things. And I have to say that I do agree. Again, getting back to our previous discussion around grades and those things, make sure that whatever it is that you're measuring is getting measured right to get you the results that you want. So that's a beautiful answer, Toby.
Thanks, Rob.
And the next question, Toby, is what is your favorite game?
Yeah, I love games. I think we all love games, don't we? In gamification, I think it's very difficult to be. I think the game that I most enjoy is Bridge. Do you know Bridge? So the card game Bridge.
I've heard a lot about it. I think I have a cousin who was very competitive about playing Bridge, but I have no clue how to play it.
No, so typically you start playing Bridge when you're about 60 or 70. So I just happen to have played it with my parents, or
you're an early bird.
An early bird. But the thing I really enjoy about Bridge is that every game is different. It's a nice mix of chance and skill. But the most interesting about it is the social game. So you play in a pair and you play over a glass of wine for a couple of hours on a nice evening. And it's just a lovely game to play, and it has lots of depth, but it also it's because it's about kind of that human interaction, and how do you kind of communicate well with your partner without saying the right, without within the rules of the game. So I've always enjoyed bridges because it's just a very nice game to play.
Fantastic. That, I have to say, is definitely a first. No, again, I have a cousin who started playing very young, and I think he was very competitive on bridge, like on his relative level.
Yeah, I don't think you need to sort of. I mean, bridge. The good thing about bridge is you can play at any level, can't you?
Yeah.
You can play at the top competition level, but you could. It's also a very nice. It's just a very nice social game to play, and I do like games that I can that. I mean, it's just interesting playing in a pair. You don't do that quite a lot of. I suppose it's a type of collaborative game in that sense, because you have to play quite closely with a partner, and I think that makes it interesting.
Certainly does. And Toby, is there anybody that you would like to listen to interviewed in this podcast in Professor Game?
I think you'd have a really great conversation with the grandfather of gamification, a man called Chuck Conrad. Who's as American as he sounds, and but he wrote a couple of books back in about 20 years ago called The Game of Work and Scorekeeping for Success.
Wow, I've never heard those.
Have you not? No. Well, I would. The Game of Work still in print. Scorekeeping for Success, you have to kind of look it up on Amazon. But both are excellent. And Scorekeeping for Success in particular is the most fantastic book. And once you read it, and if you're involved in managing or educating anybody in any sense, I mean, Scorekeeping for Success is an absolutely brilliant book, and lots of the principles that we kind of use today in gamification are really kind of founded on the work that Chuck did 20 years ago. So it really is brilliant.
Chuck Conrad. Well, I'll look him up and try to get in contact with him. If you have any personal contact with him, it would be fantastic if at the end we can talk about that and see how we can bring him on to the show.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Precisely talking about interesting people and interesting books. What is a book that you would recommend to our listeners, to the engagers?
Yeah, well, I would go with Scorekeeping for Success. I would go with Chuck's second book. I mean, it just is. I mean, am I allowed to do two books? So my two books are Scorekeeping for Success, because it's. I mean, he basically says that if you want someone to engage, you just have to show them how to win and give them simple rules, and they'll go for it. So that's, and Scorekeeping Success just a really great overview of that. But then the second one I love is Daniel Pink's Drive, which is the surprising truth about what motivates us, because I think it really opens everybody's eyes, and particularly in my experience, opens our clients' eyes to the importance of motivating people through intrinsic motivation, helping them to do what they want to do already better, rather than trying to push them in directions that they don't necessarily want to go with extrinsic motivators.
Those are fantastic books, definitely. And going back again to the scorecarding and the record keeping, it's about giving feedback. And that sounds like something that's very simple, and it doesn't sound like a gamification mechanic. But I think it's the most fundamental gamification mechanic, and it's giving feedback to people so that they know how they're doing, how well they're doing, and as often as possible. This, I mean, in a class, you at this time of humankind, you would almost be surprised at how long it can take, and it's not a professor's fault or a teacher's fault how long it takes for students to get feedback. So thinking of ways to give students quicker feedback and to give your customers faster feedback and your employees faster feedback is a direct way into leading them into whatever it is, the behavior you want them to do, for sure. So that makes great sense and a lot of sense,
cool.
Toby.
Cool.
And I would like to know what is, and again, I think the answer is almost given here. Understanding what is your superpower when it comes to gamification.
So yes, you're right. I'm going to say the score. You're getting the idea. My score science is probably my superpower, simply because I've been doing it sort of so much more detailed than everybody else. I don't think it's because I'm particularly clever or anything like that. I've just gotten so much exposure to it. But I mean, it is very interesting. I mean, how when you get into the sort of the depths of a score, how much variety there is. I mean, you've got things like sort of capping, you've got hybrid scores where you can use relative scoring and sort of points-based scoring. There's all sorts that you can do around ratios and And then I mean, one of the interesting things is you then suddenly you can also get into time-based scoring. So does the difference in time make any difference? And so actually, when you look at the mathematics, what can come out as a very simple score at the end, you've got a score of 62. What goes into it can be frightfully complicated. And I've really enjoyed sort of delving into some of the algorithms that people have presented us with and saying, come on, Toby, can you make that work on rise.global? And I've had to scratch my head and go away and sort of find ways of making it work, because we kind of, with rise.global, we've tried to make it sort of universal so that any score algorithm you come up with, it'll process it for you. But it's been amazing. It's been amazing just seeing how. I mean, did you know? I mean, have you come across CrossFit, Rob?
Yes, I have, but I haven't practiced CrossFit.
No, I'm definitely not going to do a big CrossFit. But they've got their own ranking system and scoring system. So they give you, with a CrossFit program, you get they have these things called boxes, and the way they're scoring things is that it's so competitively oriented. Your points are a derivative of your rank. So if you're rank 1, you get 10 points. If you're rank 10, you get 1 point. That kind of thing. So we had to kind of for the CrossFit users on Rise.global, we had to kind of implement their very kind of slightly esoteric scoring system. So it's amazing. it's amazing. So it's just amazing how many different ways there are to score. And it's not. I think a lot of gamification people just go, 5 points for this, 5 points for that. But I mean, that really is just scratching the surface. Once you actually get into the score algorithm, there's so much depth there. It's very exciting.
Certainly is. And Toby, we have some time for this final question, which I like to call the gamified part of the interview. And It's a question that it comes from the audience. I don't know which question will come up. I do know that the questions here make sense, but it'll be a random one that comes up. So, okay. I think I understand. I'm quoting here. I think I understand now most of the basics of gamification and would like to get started with something in my class. I am a university professor of statistics. Could you run me through some first steps of what should I do? I've read a few blogs and listened to this podcast for a while. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So, Toby, the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. So, it's a great question, isn't it? So, how do I start my class? I suppose. So, the first thing I start with is kind of so I kind of break it into four phases in terms of your thinking. So, first of all, start thinking the analysis. So, try and think of what are the needs of the students being scored, because that's really the first question is, how it's almost I would go to a student and say, how can I give you better feedback? What would you like better feedback on? And what sort of metrics can I track for you? So actually, it's a very interesting sort of question, because it suddenly puts it forces you to be player design focused. So you rather than thinking about the whole thing from your point of view, what do you want the students to achieve? Actually go and ask them, how can I help you do better? And you might be really surprised. They might say things like, well, I'd like you to tell me whether I've got my work in on time, or I'd like you to tell me how often I turn up to your lectures, or you never know. It'd be very interesting to ask that question. So that's that first sort of analysis stage. So that's where I'd start. And then once you've got that, then you want that analysis, and probably want to ask more than one person, because everybody's a little bit different, and try and get a kind of a broad sort of coverage of what your students would find interesting. And then once you've done that, then I would then design a score algorithm. So you work out what are the metrics that are going to go into the score, and then try and come up with something that is reasonable. You don't have to get it perfect. It's really important with gamification. It's not like a kind of a lot of people get this wrong. I think they think of it a bit like a sort of a marketing campaign, or we're going to get the score. This is the score. These are the rules for the game, and that's it. We're going to set them in stone, and then we're going to run the game. But actually, to be honest, I've seen yes, of course you start with some rules, but you need to iterate over time. And actually, if your players are engaged and interested, and you having the conversation, it's almost the meta conversation, if you like. Are we scoring the right things? Have we given the right number of points to this? One of the good examples I use is that there's a game, so rugby football, which is played in the UK and in many other, sort of New Zealand, and the Kiwis are very keen on it. That you think that rugby hasn't changed its point system at all. You think, oh, it's always been 5 points for a try and 3 points for a kick and things, but that's not true. I mean, over the last 100 years or so, it's changed the scoring system 14 times. So, and in fact, it started off with more points for the conversion than for the try. So, the idea that the scoring system has to sort of be set in stone and you can't change it is you only need that if you only need that kind of what do you call it, sort of ossification, that kind of constraint if you're actually giving someone a prize. But if you're just saying this is a way of giving people feedback, then you're allowed to iterate. So the second part is that design, getting the score design right. And then the two other parts that I would say to that university professor is, okay, so you've designed your score. Now have a think about how you're going to distribute it, because that medium matters. We all know in the advertising industry, we say the medium is part of the message. So if you print out the score on a scruffy piece of paper and sort of just kind of pin it onto the board at the end of the lecture, okay, that's going to say one message. If you put it in great big neon lights and shine it from the top of the building, that's going to say another. So you need to choose your medium. So perhaps it's delivering an email to each of the students' inbox, or perhaps it's showing a leaderboard in the classroom, or whatever it is that you decide. The medium is important. So decide where you're going to show it, and then finally, the last phase is, right, once you're running your program, set aside some time to manage it. Maybe have a little student committee, so you've got 2 or 3 of the keenest students who you'll meet with, say get plan to meet with them on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, and say, how's the scoring going? Is it useful? Can we improve it? And so then that gives you more player feedback, so you can iterate. So those are the sort of the phases. So if I was a statistics professor, I'd go and ask, what do you want to be scored? I'd go and then kind of design some sort of score algorithm. I'd make sure I was distributing it and giving back the scores in the way that everybody felt was natural and appropriate. And then I'd have a little team of kind of keen bees who would be managing it and iterating and improving it. And I think if you put those kind of 4 steps into action, I think you'll come up with a really fantastic program.
That's fantastic, and that makes a lot of sense, Toby. Thank you for all that advice.
Cool.
So now it's almost time to say game over. But before we do, if there's any final piece of advice you want to give to our engagers, and then give us where can we connect with you once again, and then we'll say it's game over.
Oh, brilliant, Rob! It's been very lovely chatting. I think my main piece of advice is get started. So often people look at gamification and think, I need to have something super complicated, super planned out. Every kind of I've got to design it to level 56, and I've got to have 200 different ways of getting points and 5,000 badges. Honestly, most gamification doesn't start like that. Most gamification starts with a couple of scores and 10 people. So it doesn't start. It really doesn't need to start super sophisticated. As long as you've got a kind of a mindset of iteration and growth, then you'll get there eventually. So I think just have a go, try it out. If it doesn't work, don't blame gamification. Just blame your design and try again, because there will be something right there, and take in the feedback. People, if you do gamification right, you get feedback. It'll be both negative, it'll be positive, but you will get feedback from them. They'll tell you, I don't like it, I do like it. So really kind of use that. And then to connect with me, I'm found on Twitter at Toby Beresford, or on LinkedIn, or also I'm really open to questions on Quora. If you go to Quora, Quora, you can ask questions there, and there's lots of there's a gamification street tag there, so you can ask your questions on gamification. And actually, if you ping me, I'll ask. I think you can ask to answer. I'll try and answer any specific questions that you have.
That's fantastic, Toby. And finally, I almost forgot, but I didn't.
Yo.
Is there anything you would like to mention about the book you're working on? Is there any launch date? Is there anything that we should know? Where can we get more information, etc.?
So it is still work in progress. So follow me on my social media channels. I'm setting up a website at scoresciencenotebook.com. So hopefully that it'll be live there very shortly. But otherwise, yes, please do. And also do the other thing to mention, actually, while we're on the podcast, is if you haven't tried it already, go and try rise.global. It's self-service. You can create your scorecards there. If for up to 100 students, it's free. So, if you're entering the data yourself or via a spreadsheet with 100 students, you can do it for free. It gives you the emails. It gives you a web page with your leaderboards and scores on, and your tracking, and also even a TV leaderboard as well if you want it. So do go and check out www.rise.global, because it's a fantastic tool, and I'd love to see more educators using it.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for all that generosity as well, Toby. And cool. It's time now to say game over.
Game over. Thank you, Rob, for your time. Thank you, everybody else, for listening.
Hey, Engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Toby. And if you would like to get an email with articles and the latest things happening in gamification from me, then go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started into our email list. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how to use metaphors in gamification? Dutch Driver knows exactly how to do it. Then you have to subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!